black more, black more, black more, black more, black more.
What is up, everybody? My name is James DeFiore, and this is Blackballed. We are in part 2 of our doubleheader tonight. We are going to take a look at the organization known as the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church. Once again, they have decided to show the courage of their convictions by attempting to shield the public from the idea of their educational institutions being drenched in homophobia. This story was broken today by the CBC. 2 schools lose fight to keep names secret following censored tours at Canadian Museum for Human Rights. One school, Global, says it regrets decision, argued focus was on protecting the privacy of children, which is almost certainly bullshit. The idea that they were trying to protect children probably went into their thinking, but in their minds, I would go out on a limb to say that they were probably trying to protect the children from seeing things that were gay. Okay? There was a display inside the Human Rights Museum of same-sex couples, and they wanted that display to be censored and covered up so that the children that went to their schools didn't know that perfectly good humans, not like the Brethren, actually exist. And their lawyer is Gerald Chipeur. Gerald Chipeur is the former attorney for Prime Minister Stephen Harper and the former general counsel for the Conservative Party of Canada. But let's not jump to any conclusions about Gerald Chipeur. Let's jump to as many conclusions as we can, because he seems to be there in the thick of it no matter what happens when it comes to the nastiest side of the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church. Here tonight to help me unpack the latest chapter in the homophobic adventures of Bruce Hales and his culty ways is Cheryl Hope and Richard Marsh. Guys, welcome. You guys are like my co-hosts now. What's going on? How are you guys?
I thought you were my co-host, James, actually.
Okay. We call it British Bald from now on. Okay.
Well,
thank you for bringing this to my attention today, Cheryl. I think it was you or Cheryl or Richard, both of you, whatever. Now, I am no longer surprised about anything that the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church does that lands on the side of any type of phobia or ism, whether it's racism or homophobia or just in general being just oddly insensitive towards abused children. Like, this group just ticks every single box of what it's like to embody scumbaggery. And this latest chapter is interesting in so many ways. So the CBC did break this story today. All credit to them. And the story is interesting in that they had the courage of their convictions to actually request that they censor this any content inside the Human Rights Museum that dealt with LGBT issues. But then they lacked the courage of their convictions to actually want the public to realize that it was them who asked to censor the LGBT content inside the Human Rights Museum. Like, holy shit. I mean, there is a profound kind of hypocrisy at play. And I can't stress this enough. When I saw this sub-headline in the CBC article, One School Global, which is the school, it's a group of schools worldwide that the Brethren owns and operates, says it regrets the decision, I guess, to try to censor the tours, but they argued that the focus is on protecting the privacy of children. I mean, Cheryl, can you give me your take on that amazing excuse for wanting to shield the public from knowing that it was them that argued for the censorship?
Oh, they got caught, right? Yeah. They got caught, and what's the easiest way to play it off? I mean, they used a few other excuses that I've highlighted along here, but honestly, you can't make this shit up anymore with them. Today this got me going only simply because of how they tried to cover this up and how they didn't want to out into the public side because they knew that we were going to trash it. They knew that we're going to rip them a new asshole tonight. And we are going to. And they call it bad press and, bad media. That was one of their excuses when they took it to court to not get it out of secrecy, was that, they were going to get bad press from it. Yeah, you are. But this isn't bad press. This is called exposing your bullshit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Richard?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, the excuses are lousy. I mean, they're just straight homophobic, and they're all straight stupid. And the whole, it's just bizarre that they would take their students into a human rights museum of all places when they're the number one organization against human rights. I mean, it's like them going into a sort of museum of atheism, or taking the kids to some kind of a strip club and requesting all the strippers be covered up, please. I mean, why go in there in the first place?
It's funny that you say that, because this request for censorship reminded me of a case in Montreal. Maybe it's 10 years ago now. I don't know how long ago it was, but sometime in the last decade, where there was an Orthodox Jewish temple that was down the street from a gym. And in the mornings on the Sabbath, I guess, or whatever it's called, the Shabbat, I don't know what it's called for Jewish people, but I guess it's Saturday. And during the mornings when they would make their walk towards the temple, these Orthodox Jews would see what they described as scantily clad women working out in the gym. And so they filed a human rights complaint to get the windows of the gym tinted so that their virgin eyes weren't able to see what God created, i.e. the female.
What was the offense that they were scantily clad, or that they were working on the Sabbath?
No, they were walking to temple on the Sabbath. But it was that they were scantily clad. So the point is, though, is that anytime a religion tries to trump our legislation or trump our society's just right to exist in the way that society exists by placing their religious beliefs as a challenge to society's beliefs, is always going to be problematic. It really is. There was a radical rabbi once. I'm not meaning to use all the Jewish examples, but those are the ones that just popped in my head. But where in Brooklyn, New York, wanted to get the McDonald's there to stop putting bacon on a bagel. And so anytime a religion tries to do that, I find it problematic. So, but we're talking about an organization who, if they find out that you're gay, they will try to find a doctor to prescribe you the same drugs that they use to chemically castrate pedophiles.
Yeah.
But I'm sure it was all about protecting the privacy of children.
And that's the hypocrisy of all of this, right? Yeah. So once we get through all of this, my question to Brucey is, okay, so when I get these emails from people in there that think they're gay, can I go ahead and tell them that it's fine? They can come out of the closet and you're going to accept them in loving, opening arms. I guarantee you that's not going to happen. No. But that's what they're saying. That is what they're saying in this article. They're literally that they welcome everybody with care and compassion and kindness and blah, 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 blah. So it is. I would never, ever tell these kids or anybody who emails me about their wondering if they're gay. I would never tell them to go and okay, go tell your parents, right? Because I know what would happen to them.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just, I mean, if you read the article, it wasn't just, It wasn't just sort of gay rights exhibits they wanted
Women's
covered
rights.
up. It was women's rights.
Women's rights was on there.
Women's
That's
rights.
what got me.
Yeah.
Oh, I must have skimmed
Yeah.
past that. Really?
Yeah.
Do you guys remember what was the
another
exhibit
thing
for
that-
women's rights?
Yeah.
I don't
Oh,
know.
no. And of course, that's another thing. I mean, women are terribly oppressed in the PBCC. They're not even allowed to speak, for goodness sake, and they have to sit behind the men. Not just oppressed, but publicly humiliated, and they have to wear headscarves, which is a token of their submission to men. That's the whole point of it. Women have to wear a scarf to show they're submissive. So hardly surprising they wanted the women's rights things covered up. But then there's still the question of, well, why did they go there in the first place? And the only possible excuse is it was some kind of virtue signaling. Oh, look, we take our students to the Human Rights Museum, so we must be a really good, modern, and inclusive school. And then, of course, they utterly screw it up by censoring the whole thing.
Or they went there with the idea in mind to educate the students on exercising their brethren beliefs by making the complaint. Like they may have gone there just to make the complaint. Seriously. Like,
that went through my head too. That actually went through. I was trying to figure out all what this is. Here's what it says in the article. Some specifically ask that content pertaining to LGBT and women's rights and abortion not be discussed. And some ask that a same-sex marriage display not be shown, the document says.
Yeah, the abortion thing I can see, like, listen, I'm pro-choice. I think that religion is the worst argument that pro-lifers have. I think that if you're going to argue on the pro-life side, you have probably a better scientific argument than the pro-choice side has. I'm pro-choice, so I just want to keep stating that.
Yeah, I'm
just
pro-choice too. Yeah.
Right, but if I were to be pro-life, my argument would be, well, clearly, if a woman is pregnant, that will become a human being. So you are killing something either in its beginning or whatever. But I can see that argument. I can unpack that argument. I can make that argument. But once you bring Jesus into the argument, it just falls apart, I think, right? Like it doesn't become an argument of any substance anymore.
But I mean, it goes right down to the women's rights. Like they keep their women so submissive in there, right? Mm-hmm. Like when I read, I mean, I get their whole, we know their beliefs on the LGBTQ community. We know that. But for them to specifically ask also the women's rights, like that's just, what a red flag. I do not see that if the government isn't going to take a jump on this now here in Canada, then we really don't have a government that's listening, which I don't think they are anyhow. But I mean, this really puts the exclamation mark there. Is like, this is literally.
Yeah, the government is paying. The government is paying these schools to educate these kids. And this is the nature of the school that they're paying.
They're getting public money, these schools?
Yeah,
yes, I found out today.
100%.
I had somebody call me up, or I had a good conversation with somebody today who gave me numbers on how much the government funds this school. And I am sitting here telling people, you know what? This is why you all need to be activists against this. Your money is funding how these children are raised inside their school.
I didn't know that.
Again, that's the real reason why they were so desperate that the names of the schools weren't published, because they're afraid they're going to lose their government funding. And I hope they do. They certainly should. Yeah,
they shouldn't get funding at all.
It's interesting that we're having this podcast the day after we had the one yesterday. Yesterday, in case you missed it, we basically had an international scoop as we broadcast the actual voice of Jesus's consigliere, Bruce Hales. And something happened that was interesting. Were they supposed to have another Zoom meeting tonight?
Yeah, there was another seminar that was supposed to happen.
Yeah, so there's another seminar that's supposed to happen, and then someone sent this to us. And it is from the UBT, which is the network of businesses owned by the Plymouth Brethren. And it says, important update. At the recommendation of management has a capital M for some unknown reason. We have been advised that we are unable to stream the December 2022 Sydney seminar this week as planned. We are actively working on an alternative plan and will be in touch with you as soon as possible with the detailed plan and next steps. We are sorry for the inconvenience that this has caused you, and thank you in advance for your support and patience with us as we work through a solution to fuck up the Blackballed podcast. I just added that part at the end, but we have it on good authority, I believe, that it was in response to us broadcasting Bruce Hales' voice last night. Is that right?
Yes.
Good job,
the other
guys.
point is when the brethren capitalize something like management, that always is a reference to Bruce Hales himself. They kind of always try to avoid putting his name into things, but when there's a
Is that why they capitalize the M?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and just in the same way that in the Bible, a God or any reference to God is always capitalized, they do that with with some word like management or something, and that's the hidden, that's the kind of dog whistle you want to call it.
We could show the same respect.
The big Bruce, yeah.
We could show the same respect. So if I ever write articles, in case anyone's listening, and reads my stuff, if I ever write any articles about Bruce Hales and I capitalize the word fuckface, now you know why. No? I don't know. I mean, I don't know how to do, like, we have another 45 minutes for this podcast. It is tough sometimes to come up with different ways to talk about the issue because it's so self-evidently awful. First of all, are these high schools or grade schools? I'm sorry, I didn't do much homework on this. I had other stuff.
This was grade 7 to 12, I believe.
Okay.
Grades 7 to 12.
So chances are in that group of kids, there's probably a couple gay kids that are totally in the closet.
There will be.
Right? Yeah. Just by percentages, there probably is one or two at least, right? And so imagine being that gay kid, okay, and walking around the human rights and seeing a display and being like, oh, wow, the secret that I'm keeping, at least I can feel like I'm being supported by, this museum has this up. Wow, it's a deep, dark secret. I can't. And then finding out that the entire institution that you're with, I mean, they already knew, but they would go to those lengths to try to get them to censor your own identity.
And
With
about half of those kids were female as well. And of course, they find that the women's rights things are wiped out. So that sends a pretty strong message to them to keep their heads down, doesn't it?
This is why the government can't turn a blind eye to this one, right? So many people, they just kind of, brush it over, turn a blind eye and blah, blah, blah. This is just another article on this. It's just another article. No, each one of these needs to be given such care to realize, what is this really affecting? Who is this really affecting? Like this, what they did affected literally how many lives in there that are gay? I mean, what are statistics? One in what? I don't know what it is, but the statistics are out there.
But the statistic will vary depending on whether or not people are using drugs. So, but go on.
But okay, but you go into this and you think of these people already know. Okay, like I'm thinking I'm gay. I don't know, and I am a firm believer that you were born that way. I do not believe that. I totally believe you were born that way. And so these kids or these teens who are walking around there, and now that all this has happened, they have a double dose of having to hide who they are.
Yeah.
It's just not right. It's just not right. The clip, I think I sent you the clip. The clip is incredible. They really did a good job on the clip. Yeah,
I don't know. I mean, I'm going to play it and just take the chance that I might get fucked over by YouTube. But
no, you'll be fine.
It should fall under a fair use thing, but we'll see. Yeah. So this is the clip. This is the clip from the CBC. I'm just going to play it in full. It's a couple minutes. But this is the clip from the CBC story that broke today.
This private school says its staff uphold values of integrity, respect, and compassion. But the Sterling North Stonewall School went to federal court in 2020 to prevent the public from learning about something it wanted kept secret. Sterling asked the Canadian Museum for Human Rights not to show any LGBT material while grades 7 to 12 students toured the building in 2018. By the time the case got to court, the schools were operating under the One School Global banner. The Plymouth Brethren Church set up that organization.
The Plymouth Brethren has historically been has tried to stay out of the public eye a great deal.
The school's fight to keep their identities a secret is outlined in more than 3,000 pages of court documents. The museum was going to release the names of the schools in response to an access to information request filed by the CBC, but the schools got a federal court order preventing the museum from doing that until now.
Embarrassment is not an exemption under any Access Act.
Federal Justice Catherine Kane didn't agree the school would suffer a financial loss if the records were released. But she did rule the identities of the staff members who requested the tours should be redacted. Museum records show the following schools asked for censored tours so a same-sex marriage display with photos of gay couples wouldn't be shown, and everything from LGBT rights to abortion wouldn't be talked about.
We're upset about what has happened, and I think more needs to be done to address the harm that was caused.
EGAL Canada says the harm caused by the censored tours is still raw. The nonprofit advocates for LGBT rights. It's calling on the museum to set up an exhibit about its own failure.
It's something that needs to be told. It's a story that's very significant.
The museum says it's happy the judicial review upheld its decision to release the records. It says it's part of an effort to be transparent about a very dark chapter in its past, noting it no longer lets schools request censored tours, has increased diversity in staff, and is creating new LGBT content. One School Global says the incident is one the school regrets and has learned from. Austin Grabish, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Oh, guys, they learned their lesson.
Yeah, right? I mean, what a load of freaking bullshit. You know darn well that that was just a cover up. You know, yeah, so in the article, this is what it actually says. The incident is one which the school regrets and has learned from. Our teachers and students all uphold our core values, which include compassion, kindness, and respect for all people. There's no way that if
Except for gay people, black people, women, and children. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
White males. Yeah, they support white male rights.
White males with drinking problems, you're our people, right?
Yeah.
And the schools argued the release of their names as the entities that asked the museum to censor LGBT content would likely cause them financial harm in the form of reduced grants and lower enrollment. That was their issue.
Well,
that's in the court documents?
Yeah.
Yes. This
is Chipeur's argument. Well, I mean, the reduced grants is right, but reduced enrollment, they mean all the gay couples in the Brethren won't be sending their children to that school anymore. I mean, they only have Brethren children anyway. I mean, that's just complete bullshit.
I want to you mentioned his name, so I want to take a second and talk about this guy here. So this is Gerald Chipeur. Once again, he's the former general counsel for the Conservative Party of Canada. He's also the former attorney for Stephen Harper, and I believe Pierre Poilievre. I think he used to also work at the same law firm as Ezra Levant.
Yeah.
And now there was someone gave me pause recently when I was thinking about Gerald Chipeur and the people that he represents and the fact that he represents this cult. And I was reminded of a friend of the show, Kareem Assad, who recently was basically bullied online and harassed online for being part of the legal team that represented Jeremy McKenzie. Jeremy McKenzie is like a Proud Boy. Clearly, he's a racist guy, but he also seems to be a little bit mentally unstable. He's a former soldier. He was arrested for threatening. Actually, he did threaten to rape Pierre Poilievre's wife, so that was a heinous thing. He was arrested, and then I think his case has been dismissed. But people were giving her a hard time for representing Jeremy McKenzie because, as far as everyone in the public realized, Kareem Assad stood for a bunch of principles that were completely antithetical to what Jeremy McKenzie stood for. And I argued on behalf of Karima on this podcast and online by saying that she was upholding a greater principle of only she doesn't just represent the clients that embody her narrative or her identity. she upheld this principle that everyone deserves a defense. And so it gave me pause for a moment when I was thinking of Gerald Chipeur and the need that I seem to have to want to trash him for representing this cult. And it took me a little while to sort of unpack this in my own mind. And I finally came to a place where I realized that it actually isn't the same. And I'll tell you why. The cult doesn't represent a client for Gerald Chipeur to represent based on the principle that everyone deserves to have a lawyer. Gerald Chipeur operates his own life under the same principles as the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church. He is not their lawyer because he likes the law and he's a big fan of the justice system. He is their lawyer because he's a Seventh-day Adventist who believes in the same bullshit that the Plymouth Brethren believe in. So I don't feel like I am being contradictory when I say that this man seems to be at the center of everything heinous that this cult does in this country. And also and this can't be overstated, that he is the connecting tissue between government contracts and this cult. You're not the general counsel of the Prime Minister and the Conservative Party of Canada without developing a Rolodex of contacts that you can then parlay on behalf of the cult to secure them fat PPE contracts. I'm not saying that he brokered every deal, but Jesus fucking Christ. Like, if you're like, this man is the embodiment of what this cult stands for. There is video, I wish I had it, I'm sorry that I don't, but there is video of him talking about how the right for religious expression is needed because as soon as a government is formed, he says it becomes a dangerous entity towards the people. Just by existing. Chipeur said this, and just by existing. Do you remember that clip, Richard?
Yeah, and then he says, and it gets too big, and then we have to kill it.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's
Do you
right.
know what? Do you know what he referred? This is what he said in this article that is linked with this clip. This is Chipeur. It is reasonable to assume that this phenomenon, so they're going on about the negative impact of having the names released would likely last years. It is, and so this is Chipeur. It is reasonable to assume that this phenomenon is not limited to school shootings, but the negative media attention in general will impact enrollment. He's literally taking school shootings and relating it in the same sentence to their enrollment. Like, are you kidding me?
Can you repeat that quote again?
It is
This is Gerald Chipeur, the former attorney for Prime Minister Stephen Harper and the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church's attorney. Go ahead.
It is reasonable to assume that this phenomenon is not limited to school shootings, but that negative media attention in general will impact enrollment, wrote Calgary lawyer Gerald Chipeur of Miller Thompson LLP. The claim was repeated in Bettle's affidavit in front of the federal court.
What phenomenon is he talking about?
I can explain what he's talking about.
Okay.
He is trying to make the argument that the school will lose enrollment if it gets negative press. And so to back that argument, he's pointing out that in the USA, where they had these terrible massacres, these school shootings, it impacted school enrollment. Fewer people sent their children to school,
well, of course,
because they were afraid for the safety.
Yeah.
And so this is how he backs up his argument that negative press could impact enrollment to Brethren schools. Now, the irony of it is that because he's trying to prevent the thing going public, he's actually overstating how bad it was, what the Brethren did. So he's kind of shooting himself in the foot. Now, if his argument had worked, it never would have gone public and it wouldn't have mattered. But as he lost the argument, now his own words come back to haunt him, because he's basically, someone reading it thinks, well, Chipeur thinks that what the Brethren did is as bad as having a massacre in your school. So it's very ironic.
It's also anti-media. It's anti-press too. Like, he doesn't really. He believes in religious freedom to the point where he'll represent a cult because they espouse the same beliefs that he probably carries, but he won't defend the principle of the freedom of the press because the press might do something absolutely egregious and report the truth about the Plymouth Brethren.
Yeah.
Right.
But there's a much more important that I've had exactly the same kind of mental argument in my head as to what's the distinction between a lawyer that represents the Brethren and a lawyer that is a criminal defense lawyer and is representing a murderer. But then, of course, everyone deserves a lawyer. And the answer is a criminal defense lawyer is fundamentally a good person, and he's a necessary part of the legal process, because the legal process requires you have a prosecution and a defense. Someone has to do the job. But Gerald Chipeur and the other Brethren lawyers are attack lawyers. They're not defense lawyers. They'll go out and attack someone like me or Cheryl or anyone who speaks against them with slap type lawsuits and just legal harassment. I mean, attack is the opposite of defense. I mean, in this case, they're kind of trying to do a kind of defense, but it's not really a defense. It's just a kind of a censorship job to try and keep them out of the public eye.
Well, they were also really what they were doing in this case, I guess, would be to try to stave off another Streisand effect, which is basically, you know, if we made the request for censorship of LGBT displays at the Canadian Human Rights Museum, and if you allow our names to get out there, then it will cause negative press. But then they fought it, and now the story is that they fought it, so they're going to get even more.
Exactly,
and it's not negative press. By the way, sometimes press is just truth-telling press. This idea of negative press it was created by. Listen, I have a big problem with public relations firms and crisis management firms because I just feel like they're just entities that lie. So whoever coined the phrase "negative press" was probably working for a company that did something shitty. And then the press reported on the shitty thing they did. That is not negative press. That is just truth-telling press. To me, negative press would be something that is untrue. If it's negative press coverage that you're worried about, perhaps the negativity is coming from within, and you need to figure some shit out before you allow that information to get out there or change your ways. Right, Cheryl?
Yeah, and you know what? So another part that they talked about here is the tension could affect the school's ability to attract new staff and get donations and impact enrollment numbers. So this is Lucas Bettel he was reading his affidavit. The corporation recently lost a key new hire in New Jersey due to some false media coverage unrelated to these proceedings. He says, I believe that if the records are released and the third-party school names are released to the media, it is likely to impact the third party's ability to hire and retain staff. So here's what I want to say is that I have had staff reach out to me from inside One School Global that are not PBCC members. And I think this shit needs to start coming out. I think that these teachers need to find a way to come out, and ex-teachers and ex-principals and people that are no longer in there and see what they see. Because the stories that land on my lap are horrendous. They are not protecting those children. They aren't. And that's what made this so hard to read this, was because I have all these inside stories of what really goes on in a lot of these schools. And then I read this and I'm like, this is completely false information about how they're protecting their children. The children are not, they don't care about the children. They care about the money. They care about the donations. They care about being able to get who they want, where they want it.
And again, it's not, they're not even saying that it's not true. They're just saying they don't want prospective staff to know ahead of time just how shitty they are, because that will affect their decision as to whether they want to work for these people. I mean, it's bizarre. I mean, my message to the One School Global is, if you don't want shitty press, stop doing shitty stuff.
Right?
It's as simple as that.
Seriously.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, you know, and the funny thing is so Justice Kane, she found the museum and the CBC were both entitled to have their legal costs paid for by these by these Sterling schools.
That's expensive. Plus, of course, they've got to pay Gerald Chipeur for I don't know how many thousand hours of work for writing a 3,000-page telephone directory on the subject, which was bound to fail anyway. I've got a theory. I think Gerald Chipeur is actually working for us, because all his recent interactions with the Brethren have been a complete disaster. I mean, look at my case. The brethren go running off to Gerald Chipeur, and he very cleverly introduces them to a private investigator who happens to be a police informer. That was unfortunate, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And then, of course, they're paying Gerald Chipeur, I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of dollars, and it all actually makes it a whole lot worse for them. And then we come to this next case, which was actually kind of running concurrently. And again, Gerald Chipeur he's taken probably hundreds of thousands of dollars off these guys, and all he's actually succeeded in doing is publicly comparing their behavior to a school massacre.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm beginning to warm to Mr. Gerald Chipmunk a bit.
I sure hope
he's
he doesn't
really
send
helping us out.
I hope he doesn't send us a bill.
I'm going to send him a Christmas card, actually.
Just make sure it doesn't say Happy Holidays, or he'll get really upset about that. So, the idea of, I think I differ with you on one thing. I don't think anything really has, as far as Gerald Chipeur is concerned, I don't think he feels anything has blown up in his face. Mostly because I haven't really seen a media outlet criticize Gerald Chipeur. They'll mention him as being the general counsel or the attorney for the cult. They won't call it a cult even. They'll call it the Plymouth Brethren Church. But I haven't seen any criticism about just how suspicious it is that he has these clients that he represents that end up forming business relationships, or that he is how there's recordings of him out there basically preaching. What was that Matthew and the Lion thing? What was that?
Oh yeah, that's some preaching. It's funny you mentioned that, because it was very similar to Bruce Hales saying the half of my goods I give to the poor. Gerald Chipeur, there's a recording of him preaching a sermon in which he's saying, quoting the scripture about "Blessed are the meek in spirit, for they shall inherit the earth." Yeah. I mean, they seem so blind to the irony of it, don't they?
But they probably live in a hubris, and and I understand why, where they don't feel like there's any consequences to any of their behavior. No. Right? This is the first time. This is the first time that I can recall seeing an article about the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church in this country where the focus is on the fact that they lost a legal battle. I don't recall ever seeing that. I recall the Press Progress articles. I recall the stuff we've done here and the stuff that you guys have done. I don't recall any mainstream article really like in Canada Land obviously is the exception. They're not really mainstream, but whatever. But a mainstream outlet reporting on something that had to do with the Brethren in a way that makes them look bad. The last time that happened in a big way was when they got reported on for their attack on the Gay Marriage Act back, what was that, 15 years ago? Yeah. And that hit mainstream media. And of course, it's all the same thing, isn't it? It really is. I mean, they don't seem like a group that learns lessons. No.
And from the sounds of this article, CBC really fought to want to publicize this. Like they really fought to get it publicized. Kudos to them. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Like, we should give some credit to the journalists if you can get them onto Blackballed.
Yeah, the journalist that covered this story. Oh, I don't have it there. Let's see. Yeah, it's right. Austin Grabish. Grabish. I'll see if I can find a way to get a hold of him because he's.
I suspect he probably had to work pretty hard to get this past CBC's lawyers and so on as well. Although I suppose in this case, having lost the case, it might have been easier because there was no question about it. There's no allegedly about this. This is a legal case that's been completed, isn't it?
Do you know what I didn't realize until about an hour before we went on air is that the Human Rights Museum actually did censor the exhibit.
Yeah,
they did. They totally did. Yeah.
I didn't clue into that until about an hour ago, which is like crazy to me that they would do that.
I actually contacted Egal Canada, so that's the Helen Kennedy that was speaking on that clip. I really want to sit down and talk with her because, you know, they really need to be exploited for their beliefs in the LGBT community. They really do, because we know that in today's society, the more and more people are finally feeling free to come out to who they really are, it needs to be allowed in there. They've got it, like just like they've, you know, allowed electronics back in there, and they've done certain things. That is something in there that needs to be changed, and the government needs to look at that.
And women's rights, please.
And women's rights, exactly, both of them, right? Yeah. Like,
and the women's rights thing, like just to reiterate, is all tied into just the abortion part, right? That's basically what they're talking about.
No, it was specifically written out as content pertaining to LGBT and women's rights and abortions.
Oh.
So it was 3 separate things.
Yeah, they hate feminism, don't they? They just hate the word. They hate everything about it.
Yeah, the thing we're always told in the Brethren multiple times, you know, quoted is a quote from one of the great leaders: "A woman in trousers is an abomination." Yeah.
So I wanted to point this out in this article. This was a really good article. So there's this Ken Rubin. He's an investigative researcher. He says, Ken Rubin, an investigative researcher and access to information expert, said this case reinforces that embarrassment is not an exemption under any Access Act.
Who said that?
This Ken Rubin. So they're talking about secrecy acts, right?
Right.
Yeah. And that it's a good example that embarrassment is not an exemption.
Yeah.
Cheryl, you and I were talking earlier today about the non-disclosure agreements that teachers and staff at these schools have in place with the Brethren. I've been wanting to do a podcast for about a year now on I guess what I would call the culture of non-disclosure agreements, and how they seem to be at the core of almost every scandal that I can think of, you know? And for me, it started off when I got a contract with Post Media to investigate a former news anchor, very popular news anchor, and the rumors that he had mistresses, and that wasn't the controversy, but the controversy was that he worked for CBC. You can infer by what I'm saying of who it is. I'm just not going to say his name because I don't feel like dealing with the law firm again. But the story that I was working on had to do with the CBC using public money to pay off women that he had affairs with, and he didn't do anything wrong as far as assault or anything goes. They were all juniors, but whatever. But that the CBC was keeping these affairs secret by paying off these women with public money, and everyone in the stories, you know, all the mistresses, whatever, everyone was protected, especially the CBC and this former anchor, by non-disclosure agreements. I find non-disclosure agreements to be almost at the heart of every controversial scandal that I've taken a look at, and I'm wondering if there is a bigger story here about NDAs and about how they are basically used to shield the public from stories that are in the public interest. And would you say that, you know, that just in your opinion, that the teachers that have signed these non-disclosure agreements, I mean, do you think there's any way that we can convince them to break those agreements?
Do you know what? I've been sitting and thinking about this, right? My thing is that my question is does a non-disclosure agreement come into effect? Does it really affect? Does it stay in effect if there's something criminally that's happened, or if there's something? And so I think that's the biggest thing. To me, I wouldn't. I mean, I'm not in any of their shoes, but if I was in that shoes and the shit that was going on, I did day home for 12 years. I had kids that came to me that went from day home to day home to day home. They always ended up at my house. That's where I took them. For me, I would fight anybody who came my way to protect and give children what they deserve. I don't care how many NDAs you slap on my lap. I don't fucking care. the children on this planet need people like us to start standing up and going up against what these people slap on our laps as fear-based.
Yeah.
So to me, what my advice is who are you, what are you feeding? Are you feeding the fear of these people, or are you protecting the children? Like, at some point, everybody's got to fucking wake up and realize, you know, these systems aren't broken. They're doing exactly what they're meant to do. Our job is to take them down. And the only way you can take them down is by knowing that their fear that they place on us is bullshit.
Yeah, I agree with that. I
mean,
think,
they're
and then
literally, they're farming those children like a rancher farms cattle, so they can exploit them in their businesses to make more money for the Hales family. That's exactly what they're doing.
yeah. I agree with both of you, because I think that especially the non-disclosure side of it, there needs to be, like, maybe we need to start instilling a strategy of death by 1,000 cuts. You know what I mean? Like, instead of trying to go for the big ones, I mean, you know, we'll break every story that we can, but, you know, if one after another people start breaking their non-disclosure agreements to talk about things that are true about this organization, I think that would be its own reward. I understand why people would be hesitant, because they are a scary organization when it comes to how litigious they are. But I mean, there's other ways too that you can imagine. If the museum wanted to extend an olive branch to the Plymouth Brethren Church by proposing they meet for lunch, and then have a reporter standing by saying, well, the Plymouth Brethren Church wouldn't meet them for lunch because they don't eat with people who aren't brethren. They refuse to break bread with anybody who's. I want people to know these little facets of this group so that they can be like, wait a second, they won't eat with you because you're not a brethren? Yeah, that's right. How do people, even those little tiny little details, how do people explain that? Like, how do you explain? I can't. Is there any other organization that does that besides Christian nationalist groups that refuse to eat with black people or Jewish people? Like, I can't even. Are we all Jewish people to this group, and this group is like the Nazi organization that hate? I mean, I hate using that analogy, but do you know what I mean? That's what it feels like. It feels like everyone's othered by the Plymouth Brethren. And we're just supposed to be like, well, it's just their religious beliefs. You know?
Yeah.
I just get so fired up when it comes to children. You know, like, I know how I was taken care of as a child. And so I guess maybe that's why I get so fired up about this. And I don't believe that we should be adhering to whatever piece of paper that they give anybody. Like, it's hard for me to wrap my brain around why more people won't come forward and let's just do this. If enough people get together and you sit in a room and you start talking and you realize that these are children you're trying to protect. Children. Mm-hmm. And from what I've heard from inside there, those children need to be protected, not just from sexual abuse, but from hierarchy abuse, from
especially little girls, right?
Yeah,
because little girls are growing up believing that they are second-class citizens, and that is their role, is to be a second-class citizen.
I don't care about you can have your Christian religion. You can have that. The thing is that how they treat their children through their hierarchies, that is what has to stop.
Yeah,
because I was that little girl at the bottom that got farmed out from place to place to place to place, hidden up. And do you know, I had someone contact me after the podcast last night who had witnessed me being picked up and brought back one time. And it really triggered him, because he said, your hair was the same, your makeup it was just like how you were brought back. And he said it like I had to do double takes. It's just, we have to start standing up. I'm just so fucking passionate about this, that these are kids. Like, this is our future. I just don't get why people don't think this way. And I don't think it's just my trauma. I firmly believe that any mother out there should be sitting and looking at the children of the world. I mean, it takes a fucking village to raise everybody. When I did day home, I did 12 years. I never looked at those children like they weren't mine. Those were my children too, right? And I took care of them as if they were my children. And so every mother out there needs to start looking at these children. There's how many thousands of children that are in this group?
9,000 in their school system.
Right, like,
9,000. Yeah.
I don't know. I think about it when I go to sleep at night. I think about it when I wake up in the middle of the night. That's what I think about, is how do we make these generations safe? It is not about taking this church down. It's about making this church safe for generations to grow up in. So that's to the ex-members, that's to the teachers, that's to the principals, that's to all those people. It's like, what are you willing to sacrifice of your pride, of your own fear? What are you willing to sacrifice to benefit a child that is your future behind you?
Can I ask you, Cheryl, how are we going to set the localities on fire like we just don't care if we keep the church around? Just kidding.
Well, you know what? I understand. I've had to come to terms. So I've done a lot of therapy over this. I've had to come to terms that these systems are in here, right? So people need religion, right? I get that people need religion. I had to come to terms with that years ago. So I'm okay with that. But let's make these religions safe. But yes, these localities do need to be thrown up into the air. They do, because they need to be rebuilt. They need to be stripped to the ground, and they need to be rebuilt.
Fire could do that.
Fire could do that.
Just saying. I'm not trying to step on what you're saying, because I think exactly I don't necessarily. I'm more of a tear it down person than a build it back better person, but that's just me. But. There's also something to be said, and we're going to wrap up shortly in about 5 minutes or so, but there's also something to be said for, even though the CBC did a great job fighting to put this story out, and probably were the catalyst of through freedom of information and through challenges to the publication ban or whatever it was that they did to get the story out in order for us to know that it was the Plymouth Brethren Church's schools that were behind the censorship request. I didn't see anything in the article that talked about how they were anti-woman. I didn't see anything in the article that talked about the chemical castration that some people had to go through within the church. I didn't see anything in the article about the cozy PPE contracts that this organization gets. So there is still a reluctancy on the behalf of mainstream media, even when they do report about this group, to make their reporting shorthand. And that I'd love to talk to the journalist that did this story, but I feel like the conversation is going to go something like this: how come you didn't talk about this, that, or the other thing? And they would say something like, "Well, my editor says that they're litigious, and we just want to make sure that we spotlighted this story, and we didn't really blah, blah, blah," and it's just going to become one of those conversations. And so, but if it was the Catholic Church, and they and the exact same thing happened, the exact same thing, and there were these two Catholic schools that said that they didn't want their names out there, you can bet that an article that was probably 1,200 words or whatever, that there would be a paragraph or two that spoke briefly about the history of pedophilia in the church and racism in the church and anti-gay sentiments in the church. They would do that. But the Plymouth Brethren Church is spared. And it's not because they didn't find anything. It's because of another reason that I still haven't been able to find. Richard? Cheryl?
Probably. Yeah. It's the fear of the legal system and the litigious nature, and the fact they've got unscrupulous attack dog law like Gerald Chipeur to back them up. I know it's going to be a long and expensive
We give that
fight.
too much credit, though. We're giving them way too much credit on that shit. They only use it because we allow them. Their bark is way worse than their bite. We give them that power. We have got to stop giving them that power and show them that we mean business, that we can do this. I'm not afraid of that shit. It's not. If we're
prepared to speak out, why aren't they? I mean, we don't have a big legal team to back us up.
No, and because there's nothing. There's nothing to sue me over. You come at me. Let's subpoena Bruce Hales. Let's put him on that stand and let's blow this freaking locality up.
I'm sure they've got plenty to sue me over, but I don't actually have any money to pay them, so that makes it rather simple.
I don't either. But I think that what I'm fired up about today is that we are giving them way too much power with their money, with their lawyers, with all this shit. It's you got to realize that it's just a little tiny chihuahua that's going to bite at your little ankles. It's not going to hurt. You can have a Band-Aid, wrap it up, and let's get going.
Well, I agree with basically all of that, with the exception of the one thing. Okay, there is something to be said for the power of a high-profile lawyer. When I was working on that story that I was talking about before, it was with Post Media. And the reason why I got my contract canceled was because Jamie Watt from the crisis management firm Navigator Limited, or Navigator Inc., whatever, Navigator, called the law team of Post Media. And the Post Media lawyers probably got on the phone and was like, oh, it's Jamie Watt from Navigator, and they were like, yes, Mr. Watt. Okay, yeah. Oh, he did what? Oh, well, we'll take care of that right away, sir. Like, the power of a high-profile attorney to other attorneys, man, it's like a rookie basketball player talking to Michael Jordan sometimes, and they just like, whatever you say, Mike. There is a behind-the-scenes culture in the law community, I guess you would say, where there is often this this deference paid to lawyers that have more profile than you.
Yeah, well then, you know what? Those lawyers need to start, do you know what? I sat down on my meet and greet with my lead investigator, and I didn't give a shit what I said to him. And I told him, I said, the Pope could walk in here, and if I knew that he wasn't taking care of children, I'm not going to say what I said because I'm trying to watch my F-bombs tonight. But
fuck it. Just say it.
I would tell him to go fuck himself.
Yeah, that's right.
Because I don't give a shit what stature you hold. If you are not taking care of the children, I don't care if you're the Queen of England. I don't give a shit where you are, what crown you hold on your head. Everybody needs to realize that children need to be taken care of first. You
know what the interesting thing about what you just said is that it was an actual pope that created the policy of transferring pedophiles from one diocese to another.
Right?
It was Pope Benedict. Yeah.
In there.
So, yeah. Listen, guys, I wonder what story is going to break tomorrow, and we'll see you tomorrow night maybe, because this just doesn't stop. There's a gift that keeps on giving. This was worthwhile, and I'm glad you guys came out again. If there's anything that you want to leave us with, let me know now and cut me off. Every time I ask you that, there's an awkward silence. I'm going to stop asking you guys that. For real. But listen, thank you again. Your contributions to this and to my podcast are invaluable, and I do appreciate it. I won't tell you guys enough how much I appreciate you guys.
We appreciate you too, James.
Yeah,
well, thank you very much. I appreciate everything that you guys do, and thank you for bringing this to my attention. And we'll have you on again soon. Okay.
Sounds good. Take care, love.
Okay. Thanks, Cheryl. Thanks, Richard. Have a good one, guys. Yeah. So just to recap. They demanded censorship of an LGBT display at a human rights museum, and then fought for 2 years to make sure no one knew it was them. and they claimed to do it under the guise of protecting the privacy of the kids that they tried to censor the LGBT content for, because that makes no sense at all. Tomorrow on Blackballed, we have kind of a cool guest, actually. She is, I don't want to get it wrong, so I'm going to do this the right way. She is she's a board member at Anti-Corruption Action Center, and she is also the co-founder of the International Center for Ukrainian Victory. Olena Halushka is going to join us, and I'm pretty excited about this. She has a kind of a grim task where every day she'll post a new casualty from the Ukrainian side of the war between Russia and Ukraine, and she's super passionate about the brave men and women who are fighting against the Russian inside Ukraine. So we're going to talk to her. I'm going to see if Alex wants to come back and talk. Usually when I have someone from Ukraine, I get Alex on board as well, just to talk to him a little bit and get an update. But that's going to be tomorrow. at noon. So that is a noon start tomorrow. So hopefully we'll see you guys then. And we will see you next time on Black Belt. Thanks, everybody.
Black more. Black more. Black more. Black more. Black more. Black more.